Hello, and happy Maryland Archaeology Month. My name is David Gadsby, and I'm a board member for the Council for Maryland Archaeology. I'm here today with archaeologist Elizabeth Comer of Elizabeth Anderson Comer Archaeology to discuss her work around this year's theme, African Diaspora Archaeology, a collaboration with descendants. Good afternoon, Elizabeth.
Well, good afternoon, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Great.
Great.
On my way to Catoctin Furnace, so everything's great.
Oh, wonderful. Well, can you tell us a little bit about that and tell us a little bit about where you work?
Sure. So, as you said, I am an archaeologist, and I have a sort of passion, I would say, for a project I've been working on now for more than a decade at Catoctin Furnace in Frederick County, Maryland. And it is sort of the subject of, well, in our household, we say it's all Catoctin Furnace all the time. So it is an iron worker village from the time of the Revolution, and we are working very diligently to find and connect the descendant community with the skilled enslaved iron workers who were there at Catoctin from the time of the Revolution until about the 1840s. But I'm not sure that's the question you asked, but that's the one I answered.
Great. Well, we may follow up a little bit more about that. Can you tell the listening audience what's your favorite thing about your job?
My favorite thing about archaeology and my job is that no 2 days are ever the same. They are crafted not carefully, but just as a reaction to whatever the research is that we're undertaking, what the phone brings or what the email brings in the morning. Every day is an adventure, but that's sort of like an archaeological excavation. One never knows from minute to minute what is going to become obvious. When I was the archaeologist for the city of Baltimore, I used to do this daily dig update that talked about the way in which our interpretation would literally change on a daily basis based on what we were finding. And that sort of sums up my life, Dave.
And then occasionally some guy will call you up and ask you to go monitor a paddock in Shenandoah National Park or something.
That's right.
Something that I do
always
occasionally.
An adventure. Always an adventure.
Great. So can you tell us, how did you get into archaeology and what keeps you in it?
Sure. Oh, I love that question. I actually remember sitting on the floor of my parents' farmhouse as probably a 5-year-old, looking at National Geographic, which of course arrived monthly, and realizing now later that it was in fact an underwater archaeology project that sort of captured my attention. But I just became fascinated, and I grew up in an late 18th century, just after the Revolution, federal period farmhouse in Frederick County. My parents were very interested in history. We had a very large prehistoric site, which I've recorded on the farm that I grew up, where I grew up, and the home, the outbuildings. You know, my relatives, everybody lived in a historic house. What can I say? I come by it naturally. It's sort of, it's probably bred in the bone, to use that phrase. But I can't, my favorite day, everyone has a favorite day, right? My favorite day is a museum. Doesn't make any difference. Like last week I was in London, and every day I went to a different small museum. I was supposed to be doing research on Joshua Johnson, which I did. But I also managed to find Handel and Hendrick's house. Yes, they shared, not at the same time, but they shared a house, go figure. And then Hogarth and Freud, and, just history is, to me, what really matters. Plus Bloomberg's, temple of his Greek, Roman temple in the middle of Cheapside in London. So museum every day. I'm digressing here. Get me back on subject, Dave.
That's okay. No, so that's a good answer to what keeps you in it. What keeps you in archaeology is that you're fascinated, right? Um, so next question, can you tell us a little bit about your Maryland Archaeology Month topic for this year?
Well, again, all Catoctin Furnace all the time, Dave. And actually, as you can see, I'm sitting in my car on my way to Catoctin Furnace. So my article this month for Maryland Archaeology Month was about Catoctin Furnace, and specifically about our quest for and our beginning to have success at finding the descendant community. When we started sort of revamping this 51-year-old historical society, really sort of re-energizing it a decade ago, our goal was to find and connect, to centralize the narrative, and to find and connect the African American enslaved, the descendants of the enslaved and free African American workers with their legacy, because that had been lost. It had been lost in the prevailing narrative, it had been lost in the memory of the families, and certainly it was lost in the interpretive features that the site provided to the visitor. And we did not have any success. I mean, far and wide, through publicity, through talks, through every means that we could think of, including digital media, we came up with no one. And that is understandable now that we realize what happened to Catoctin, which is that the African Americans were sold away and moved away and left northern Frederick County, so that it's a unique situation in which the descendant community was completely erased, and not even, like some sites like Montpelier have a descendant community geographically close by. That's not an unusual pattern, but for Catoctin, it did not exist. So my article for Maryland Archaeology Month was to talk about the success that we're having now with really several modes of a descendant community creation. The first, because we had no direct descendants or even collateral or deep time descendants, was what the concept I came up with, which is this collective kinship. Anyone who comes to Catoctin who's African American can embrace, can understand, can take away this idea that collectively the African American community made the shells that were used at the siege of Yorktown, made the stoves, made the wealth, the prosperity, the power, the prestige of the owners. So that is the collective kinship concept. But as we began exploring modern techniques for making these connections through mechanisms like DNA, we were able to expand that to collateral and deep time kinship. And then ultimately, just in February of 2024, a month and a half ago, we've been able to make the first direct connection using ancient DNA to modern DNA and connecting a family in Hagerstown back to their ancestor, who was either a first cousin or a half sibling to a gentleman who was a worker at Catoctin, Hanson, and later he had a last name, Hanson Summers. So long-winded answer, but that is what we've been able to do. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. We know that within just the 23andMe database, which is our principal partner for the direct by identical by descent direct DNA connection, we have nearly 3,000 direct descendants that are in that database. And of course, there'll be many more that aren't in the direct and already in that database. And then we have nearly 41,000 collateral or deep time connected descendants as well. So it's a large number.
That's huge, yeah. And so the last question is about relevance. Why do you think this is an important topic to talk about now?
Well, I'm not a descendant of the Mayflower. I'm not a member of the Mayflower Society, but it's always seemed just phenomenally unfair to me that as a European American, I can go back to England and go to the village, Winterbourne and Westerly, in Gloucestershire, that some of my relatives came from, or I can go back to Alsace or little towns in Germany. I can walk into the church. I can see where these baptisms, marriages, took place, 5 centuries ago. That's not that, whether you want to do it or not is a personal decision. But if you want to know from whence you come, it's very unfair that the African American community has been robbed of that ability. And so this attempt that we're undertaking to make these direct connections so that people can say, here's where we came from, here's what we did. That's what I think the relevance is. And this is borne out by our the descendants that we have located and reconnected with, who are, there's not an exaggeration, absolutely thrilled to know that their ancestors were skilled iron workers. They've said things like, we never talked about it. We thought they were enslaved people, unskilled. But now we understand that they were highly valued, that they were highly skilled, and that has changed their whole view of their family's past. And that, if you want it, it should be available to you. If you don't want to know that, that's fine. But why should that be denied an entire segment of our population? So that's what we're trying to do on a small scale, albeit at Catoctin Furnace. Little Catoctin Furnace, Dave.
Well, Elizabeth, that is very cool work, and I thank you very much for spending a few minutes to tell me a little bit about it, and our viewers. But so I really appreciate it, and it's good to see you, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much. Great questions, by the way. And the best part was they were easy to answer. So thank you again. And thank you to everyone who put together the issue for Maryland archaeology and put together this digital recording. I think it's incredibly important. The more people we reach, the more people we get excited about this, about our history, and about its strength and its the ability to bring people together. That's really what we're trying to do. So thank you for doing this, and I look forward to hearing it, and the other speakers as well.
Me too.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Elizabeth.